Marvel's Avengers is an interesting case of refusing to learn from the past. From the failure that was Anthem to the growing pains of Destiny, you'd think that Marvel's Avengers would have managed to become at least semi-successful. Think about it, a AAA, big-budget, multiplayer Marvel's Avengers game should work. At least on paper it sounds like it. Combine all of that with it releasing a year after Avengers Endgame, when everyone is thirsty for MCU content, and while Marvel's building up hype for Phase 4 of the MCU, Marvel's Avengers should have easily managed to capitalize on its potential audience. Marvel's Avengers' reputation is so bad that even when the game goes on sale for $20 to $25, people still question whether the game's worth it or not. It's so bad to the point that the game released on September 4th, 2020, and by November 25th, 2020, Square Enix lost over $60 million because of the game's lack of sales. I genuinely don't blame gamers for not wanting to pick up Marvel's Avengers. In fact, I can entirely understand that mindset because Crystal Dynamics makes it hard to see the game in a positive light. The problem with Marvel's Avengers is that I want to love this game. I truly do. But the reality is that it feels like Crystal Dynamics doesn't want to let the players love this game. Before I voice my frustrations with Marvel's Avengers, I feel the need to state the following. I understand that due to the ongoing pandemic, the game development process has only gotten harder. That doesn't apply to just this game either, it applies to the entire gaming industry. I know that because of these struggles, things such as upcoming content drops, patches, and even upcoming things on the internal roadmap that we don't even know about for this game have likely been heavily delayed. This isn't my problem with Marvel's Avengers. In fact, I sympathize with every single developer going through these struggles. Now with that being said, I don't understand how a game based on one of the biggest IPs in pop culture has been this mishandled. A game like this should have been handled with so much love and care so it can do right by the fans. A AAA big budget multiplayer Marvel's Avengers game should be one of the biggest games out right now. This game should have been in sync with the MCU, so characters such as Wanda, Vision, Falcon, Winter Soldier, and even Loki could be released as timed content drops as their shows start or end. So that way, they could have capitalized on people wanting more MCU content and possibly get them to make their way over to the game. Since, you know, there would be content based around those characters from those shows in that hypothetical scenario. I know, these things once again, on paper, sound like easy layups and are easier said than done. Plus, there's an ongoing pandemic which makes this nearly impossible. It's just that I simply don't understand how this wasn't a big focus for the game originally with how much hype surrounds the MCU as a whole. On one hand, I can entirely understand if they didn't want to get tied down by the MCU canon. On the other hand though, the MCU fandom is way too big to ignore and you should do everything you can to actually capitalize on that audience. Then on top of all of this, you have to include the fact that Spider-Man, who will likely be the game's biggest character, assuming he actually makes his way to the game, is a console exclusive for PlayStation? Do you think that helps the game's likelihood of surviving at all? I understand that Spider-Man is one of PlayStation's exclusive games, but Spider-Man is a character that you want everyone everywhere to be playing, so he can attract new players around the gaming community. The last thing a dying game like Marvel's Avengers needs is console exclusive content that will frustrate players who put time into this game on other platforms. And the fact that I have to call Marvel's Avengers a dying game less than a year later hurts, man. You can't blame me though. The lack of love for this game is so evident because there's not even a content roadmap available for Marvel's Avengers. The closest thing to a roadmap that we have for this game is this graphic for next generation features and the Hawkeye content drop. Every single games as a service game needs a detailed content roadmap. Even if it's not immediately available prior to its release, as long as it's released within the launch window timeframe, that game needs a roadmap image that the players can refer to so they know what to expect in the upcoming updates. Destiny 2 has done such a good job with this as far back as April 2018, and they're still doing it now with various seasons and major DLC releases. Ubisoft has even done a good job with making roadmaps for games such as Rainbow Six Siege, The Division 2, or even For Honor. Hell, Godfall has a content roadmap available for its player base. It might not be much, but at least it's something. How am I or other people who spend time playing Marvel's Avengers supposed to be excited and want to keep coming back to this game if we're being kept in the dark about upcoming content? If there is any games as a service game that needed to have a content roadmap released prior to its release, it's Marvel's Avengers. I'm not just saying that because it's a games as a service game. I'm saying that because there's a gigantic audience of people who love and adore anything related to Marvel because of the MCU. You should want to capitalize on that massive audience by having a content roadmap out there for them to not only discuss or theorize about, but to also be excited about too. The fanbase or subreddit shouldn't have to make a fake fan-made roadmap for the sake of the community, since the developers have yet to release one. To add to this mess of a game, Marvel's Avengers lacks any sort of real personality. Kamala Khan is the clear standout as the only Avenger in this game that is enthusiastic about things and written believably. Every other hero feels lackluster because we've seen their MCU counterparts. Marvel's Avengers doesn't feel like it's trying hard enough to be different versions of the MCU counterparts, and hope that us MCU fans would simply buy into this game with no second thought. I, and likely many other MCU fans, can't buy into a Marvel's Avengers game that way if the main characters are lackluster versions of the MCU counterparts. As an example, Iron Man in this game feels like it's trying too hard to be like Robert Downey Jr.'s iconic performances throughout the MCU. It's hard for another actor to live up to that expectation, even if a bunch of famous voice actors were hired to do the job. As I said, Kamala's the only character whose writing I thought was believable, and part of the problem is that the rest of the cast is limited in their interactions with each other, so they don't feel like they have any camaraderie. The only other time the chemistry between the Avengers feels real is when Kamala and Bruce have scenes together. I love these characters, but I don't love this version of them. Now, the MCU Avengers may feel like an unfair target of comparison, but it's clear to me that Marvel's Avengers wasn't trying to stand apart from it, so the comparison stands. Crystal Dynamics had 10 full years worth of films to use as references for both the chemistry and gameplay aspects of Marvel's Avengers, yet even that frustratingly falls flat. Speaking of frustration, this brings me to the reason I even decided to make this video in the first place. Crystal Dynamics decided that it was a good idea to announce a change that absolutely nobody wanted. They decided that they wanted to make this game's grind even slower. That's right, they decided they wanted to do an XP rework because, and I quote, "The problem we were seeing and hearing was that you would immediately get more skill points than you had time to review, apply, and get used to before embarking on your next mission and gaining your next few levels. Hopefully, you can see the issue here. We want people to level up. In fact, we really want to see more people level up more heroes, as playing the full Avenger roster should be the most fun thing you can do. But we don't want the leveling up experience to be too overwhelming or diminish exploring each skill purchase." The reasoning literally sounds like they're saying that their player base is too stupid to understand the abilities of each Avenger because you level up too quickly. Who was really complaining about this being too quick? They literally decided to make the game worse when there's much bigger problems in this game to begin with, yet this is where their priorities are? Firstly, there's barely any enemy variety throughout the entire game. Literally, there's maybe just over a handful of enemies and they're barely any different or distinguishable by any means. Most of the enemies are just lifeless aimbots that run at you and are killable within a few hits. Secondly, the biggest problem is that most of the Avengers aren't enjoyable to play as until they're level 50. If anything, Crystal Dynamics should want to rush you to level 50 so you can have every skill point used and every ability unlocked to get the most out of each Avenger. Both Hulk and Iron Man are simply not fun to play as throughout the entirety of the campaign. I literally did everything I can to play as Thor and Kamala only because they were the only ones I enjoyed playing as. You might not believe me, but I say this wholeheartedly. The flying in Anthem does Iron Man's flying better than Marvel's Avengers does Iron Man's flying. Thirdly, this game contains some of the most forgettable villains ever, and this is a game based on comic book characters. I simply don't understand the choice of using boring, gigantic aimbots for almost every boss battle in the campaign. You literally have years upon years of villains to choose from, and they managed to make every single boss some overly big and uninteresting, meaningless, forgettable character. Even when I was fighting MODOK, who's the big main villain in this game, not that anyone probably cares, I literally couldn't stop saying, this might be the most boring final boss I've ever played in a game, out loud for several minutes straight. I'm genuinely not exaggerating here. Instead, they're focused on doing an XP rework because they feel like, again, their player base is possibly too stupid to understand the abilities they're unlocking with their multiple skill points. Instead, they're focused on not listening to their community that continuously puts out great suggestions on the Avengers subreddit. Instead, they're focused on bringing two identical Avengers that use bows into the game 7 months after its release. Not that this makes anything better, but they announced Hawkeye 1 month prior to his release date after going radio silent on their community for what felt like forever. I understand that Hawkeye was delayed because of the pandemic, but why would you announce content that's 1 month away after going radio silent? If you're already radio silent, wouldn't it make more sense to actually announce something much closer to its release date to build up more hype and anticipation? It's so frustrating that this game has so many questionable decisions being made when there's so much potential. Immediately after announcing that XP rework, the entire gaming community voiced against that decision and verbalized how much of a bad idea it was. And you know what the developers did? After a full day of community posts on the subreddit, multiple articles being written on very well-known gaming journalism sites, and more, they literally doubled down on this choice. A huge portion of the gaming community is trying to help them make this game succeed, and yet they still decided to basically say, you know what, we feel good about this decision. This is literally the most that Marvel's Avengers has been spoken about since its release, and instead of trying to save face, they doubled down. You would think that they'd put out a statement after seeing the response they got from the gaming community and say that they stand by their player base so they won't make this change. In fact, they should do the complete opposite and take some notes from Final Fantasy XIV by making this game even easier so people can reach level 50 quicker. The whole point of a superhero game is to feel like a superhero, and they should want their players to feel like a strong Avenger as soon as possible. They shouldn't be actively telling their players to level up their Avengers as much as possible before the XP rework because it's purposely going to be more difficult. This absolutely makes no sense. I want to love Marvel's Avengers. I really do. All of this frustration is being said because of how much I love Marvel superheroes, the MCU, and even DC Comics too. Marvel's Avengers might not go down in history in the same fashion as Cyberpunk 2077, but it's always going to be looked at as a missed opportunity. Superheroes deserve so much love if you're going to turn them into video games, and when they're done right in the same way that the Batman Arkham series was done, it's easy to see the potential of superhero games. As I said, on paper, this Marvel's Avengers game should have worked. It should have been enjoyable, it should have been one of the biggest games as a service games, and more importantly, it should have been successful. However, due to a bunch of frustrating reasons, at this point in time, Marvel's Avengers is nothing more than an okay campaign with upsetting decisions being made. Even after completing the Kate Bishop Operation Taking Aim content, that literally took me only a few hours, and I was done. I genuinely don't know how much longer Marvel's Avengers can exist as a game if their content drops are once every couple of months and the content drops are nothing more than a few hours long. There needs to be more of a reason for players to come back to this game outside of a few hours of content. part of the reason why other games as a service games do so well is because the typical $30 to $40 DLCs keep players occupied for at least a few weeks. By the time the players are done with the content, new stuff is already coming that gives players a reason to grind and reach those endgame levels. Unfortunately, as of right now, Marvel's Avengers doesn't have that. It sucks to say that because I wish it did. I wish I could have hours upon hours of content to do on Avengers in the same vein as we currently do on Destiny 2. I and so many other people adore everything Marvel. The MCU helped create that obsession, and if the job was done right for this game, people would be obsessed with it as well. I don't know how these problems can get fixed. Hell, I don't even know if the problems will ever get fixed due to the pandemic slowing things down too. It might require a ton of quality of life changes and one massive jam-packed paid DLC in order to save the game so people know that Crystal Dynamics aren't playing around anymore. Yes, I know no one likes paid DLC, but clearly the currently free content isn't enough to interest people to come back and invest more time into this game. Please, Crystal Dynamics, save this game. Let us love this game already. There's so much missed potential when it comes to Marvel's Avengers, and unfortunately, Avengers, we're not ready to assemble just yet. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you really enjoyed this video, hit that sub button. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, write a comment down below. Don't forget to keep it real with peace, love, and positivity.